Walk into any pharmacy, any health food store, any supermarket wellness aisle in America today, and you will find an entire wall dedicated to one product category: probiotics, capsules, gummies, powders, drinks, sachets, refrigerated strains, spore-based strains, multi-strain formulas, shelf-stable formulas, each one promising to fix your gut, repair your microbiome, boost your immune system, clear your skin, improve your mood, and solve the chronic digestive problems that have become so normalized in the modern West that most people have simply accepted them as a permanent feature of adult life, and they are expensive. A quality probiotic supplement runs anywhere from $30 to over $100 a month. The global probiotic supplement market was valued at over $70 billion in 2024. $70 billion every year, spent by people in the developed world trying to put back into their guts the living bacteria that modern life, modern food processing, and modern medicine have systematically removed. Now I want you to hold that number in your mind. $70 billion a year. And then I want you to look at Japan. Japan has one of the most diverse, most stable, and most well-maintained gut microbiomes of any population on Earth. Japanese gut microbiome research has consistently found bacterial diversity and specific strain prevalence that researchers study specifically because it is so dramatically different from the Western equivalent. Japan has among the lowest rates of the inflammatory gut diseases that drive Western supplement sales. Japan has digestive health outcomes that the rest of the developed world cannot replicate despite spending billions of dollars trying to, and Japan has never bought a probiotic supplement. Not because they cannot afford them, not because they are uninformed, because they have never needed to, because over 1,000 years ago, long before the supplement industry existed, long before the word microbiome was coined, long before scientists understood what bacteria even were, Japan accidentally created the most effective, most diverse, most affordable, and most bioavailable probiotic food that has ever existed. It costs approximately $2 for a container that lasts 2 to 3 weeks. It is available in almost every grocery store in the country. It is made from 3 ingredients. It has been eaten every single morning, before anything else, by a significant portion of the Japanese population for over 1,000 years. And the supplement industry would prefer that you never figure out that it does everything their $60 bottle claims to do, and does it better, and does it for a fraction of the cost. It is called Miso. And today I'm going to tell you everything about it that the label on your probiotic bottle will never say. Stay with me until section 5. Because that is where the direct comparison gets specific enough that it will fundamentally change what you do next time you walk past the supplement aisle. And stay until the very end because I'm giving you the exact daily protocol for using Miso the way Japan has used it for 1,000 years, starting tomorrow morning. Let us get into it. Before anything else, let me tell you what Miso actually is, because most people in the West who have encountered it know it only as the warm soup that comes before sushi, and that understanding is so incomplete that it actively prevents them from grasping why it is important. Miso is a fermented paste made from soybeans, salt, and koji. Koji is the critical ingredient that most Western explanations skip over or mention without explaining, and skipping it means missing the entire biological mechanism that makes Miso remarkable. Koji is the common name for Aspergillus oryzae, a fungus that is cultured onto grain, typically rice or barley, and which produces an extraordinary range of enzymes during its growth. Enzymes that break down proteins into amino acids. Enzymes that break down starches into sugars. Enzymes that unlock nutrients from soybeans that would otherwise be inaccessible to the human digestive system. Koji is the biological engine that drives Miso's transformation from 3 raw ingredients into one of the most complex food products ever created. When koji inoculated grain is mixed with cooked soybeans and salt and left to ferment, something remarkable happens over weeks, months, and in the case of long-aged Miso, years. The koji enzymes break the soybeans down at the molecular level. Simultaneously, the salt selects for specific bacterial populations while suppressing harmful ones. Lactic acid bacteria. The same family of bacteria that forms the foundation of nearly every probiotic supplement on the market, establish themselves in the fermenting mass and begin producing lactic acid, further preserving the mixture and creating the characteristic flavor depth that Miso develops over time. By the time fermentation is complete, Miso is not 3 ingredients anymore. It is an ecosystem. A living community of bacteria, fungi, and their metabolic products that includes over 150 distinct compounds and dozens of living microbial species. The white miso you buy at a grocery store has been fermenting for a few weeks. Red miso has been fermenting for several months to a year. The darkest, most pungent traditional misos have been fermenting for 2 to 3 years, and their microbial complexity is proportionally greater. This is the foundation. Miso is not a simple fermented food. It is one of the most biologically complex fermented foods ever developed, produced through a multi-stage fermentation process that modern food science is still not fully able to replicate or characterize. Every batch is slightly different. Every producer's miso carries the specific microbial fingerprint of the environment it was made in. It is alive in the most literal sense of the word, and that aliveness is precisely what makes it work. The implications of that aliveness extend further than most people realize. A living food is not a stable product. It changes. It deepens. It produces new compounds over time as fermentation continues even in your refrigerator. A capsule bought in January is chemically identical to the same capsule bought in December. Miso bought in January is biologically different from miso bought in December because it has continued to develop across those months. Here is the first thing the probiotic industry does not want you to understand. The product they are selling you in a capsule was isolated, freeze-dried, and sealed in a container designed to survive a supply chain, a warehouse, a retail shelf, and your kitchen counter before you open it. The product Japan has been eating every morning is alive right now, actively fermenting, biologically dynamic, and arriving in your gut in an entirely different functional state than anything that was processed, packaged, and sold to you at a markup. The average probiotic supplement contains between 1 and 10 bacterial strains. Premium supplements may contain 12 to 15. The marketing on these products lists each strain with its full Latin name, its colony-forming unit count, and whatever clinical study the manufacturer has selected to represent its benefits. And the cumulative impression is of a sophisticated, scientifically formulated product delivering a comprehensive microbial solution. Miso contains somewhere between 200 and 400 distinct microbial species depending on the type, the aging period, and the production method. This is not a slight advantage. It is a different category of biological input entirely. Why does diversity matter so specifically? Because the gut microbiome is an ecosystem, and ecosystems do not function on single inputs. Every bacterial species in a healthy gut performs a specific function. Some species produce butyrate, the primary energy source for the cells, lining your colon. Some regulate the immune cells that patrol the gut wall. Some produce neurotransmitter precursors that influence mood and cognitive function. Some metabolize dietary compounds that would otherwise pass through unused. Some produce bacteriocins, natural antibiotics that suppress pathogenic bacterial populations. Some directly compete with harmful organisms for attachment sites on the gut lining. A supplement delivering 10 strains is giving your gut 10 instruments in an orchestra that needs 100. The music it produces is recognizable as music but missing the depth, the complexity, and the functional completeness of the real thing. A food delivering 200 to 400 strains is delivering the orchestra. There is also the consistency argument, which is perhaps the most important and the least discussed. The effectiveness of probiotic bacteria depends entirely on whether they survive the journey from where they enter the body to where they need to work, which is the large intestine. Stomach acid is the primary obstacle. The stomach's pH is designed to kill microorganisms, which is an important immune function, but it also kills a significant proportion of the bacteria in any supplement before they reach the gut. Studies measuring the actual viability of supplement bacteria at the level of the large intestine consistently find significant losses. The capsule contains 1 billion colony-forming units. The gut receives a fraction of that. Misobacteria arrive differently. They arrive embedded in a food matrix, surrounded by the proteins, fats, and complex carbohydrates of fermented soybean. That matrix provides physical protection during transit through the stomach that a capsule's contents do not have. The bacteria are not free-floating in an acid environment. They are embedded in a biological structure that partially shields them from the stomach's destructive chemistry. More of them arrive where they need to be, in viable condition, ready to work. A person who takes a probiotic supplement for 30 days and stops has delivered bacteria into a gut that may or may not support their survival. A person who eats miso every morning for 30 years has been continuously rebuilding microbial populations that have had time to establish and functionally integrate at a depth that no 30-day course can approach. The bacteria in your capsule are dying on the way in. The bacteria in your miso soup are arriving alive in significantly higher proportions. Same destination, very different survival rate. This is not speculation or traditional wisdom. There is now enough direct comparative microbiome research between Japanese and Western populations to make specific, documented claims about what decades of daily miso consumption produces in the gut, and the findings are striking enough that they have generated significant academic interest. Japanese gut microbiomes consistently show higher populations of bifidobacterium, one of the most studied and most consistently beneficial bacterial groups associated with gut health, immune regulation, and reduced inflammation. They show higher populations of Akkermansia muciniphila, the bacterial species responsible for maintaining the mucus layer that protects the gut wall. They show higher overall species diversity across every metric researchers use to assess microbiome health, and they show specific bacterial species and genetic adaptations related to the metabolism of fermented food compounds that are essentially absent from Western gut microbiomes. A particularly striking finding involves the presence of genes encoding enzymes, specifically adapted to metabolizing the polysaccharides found in traditional Japanese fermented foods. These genes are found in the gut bacteria of Japanese individuals at rates dramatically higher than in Western populations. They did not arrive through genetics. They arrived through food, consistent, daily, long-term consumption of fermented foods selected for the bacterial populations that could most efficiently process those foods, and those populations passed their metabolic capabilities across generations of bacterial reproduction in the gut. The microbiome adapted to the diet. The diet was miso. What makes this finding particularly significant is that it is not a product of deliberate health optimization. Nobody in Japan was eating miso to improve their microbiome diversity scores. They were eating it because it was breakfast, because it tasted good, because their parents made it and their grandparents before that. The health outcome was the unintended consequence of a culinary tradition that happened to be doing exactly what microbiome science would eventually recommend. Lower rates of inflammatory bowel disease. Lower rates of the functional gut disorders that send millions of Western adults to gastroenterologists and supplement aisles every year. Lower rates of the gut permeability, commonly called leaky gut, that allows bacterial products to cross into the bloodstream and trigger the systemic inflammation associated with everything from autoimmune conditions to depression to cardiovascular disease. None of this was achieved through a supplement protocol. None of it was achieved through a 30-day gut reset program. It was achieved through a bowl of miso soup every morning, every day, for a lifetime that began in childhood. The consistency and the duration are what produce the outcome, and no supplement has ever been studied over the same time horizon with the same population-level results. Most of the conversation around miso focuses on its probiotic bacteria, the living cultures, the fermented organisms, and that conversation is accurate as far as it goes, but it is incomplete in a way that significantly understates miso's biological value. Because the bacteria in miso are only half the story. The koji enzymes produced during fermentation do not disappear when fermentation ends. They remain in the finished miso paste in active form, and when you consume miso, you're consuming not just live bacteria but a comprehensive package of digestive enzymes that your own pancreas and small intestine produce at significant biological cost. Amylases that break down complex carbohydrates, proteases that break down proteins into amino acids, lipases that break down dietary fats. These enzymes are produced by your own body in adequate quantities when your digestive system is functioning optimally. But modern diets, processed food, chronic stress, and the overconsumption of alcohol all reduce the body's own enzyme production over time. The digestive enzyme supplement industry, which is another multi-billion-dollar category, exists to address this specific problem. Miso delivers enzymes and bacteria simultaneously in one food for $2. The digestive enzyme supplement sitting next to the probiotic supplement on the pharmacy shelf is selling you separately, something that miso has been delivering together for 1,000 years. The supplement industry has separated one food into its components, packaged each individually with separate branding, and sold them back at separate price points to consumers who could have had all of them in one bowl for $2. The fragmentation is purely commercial, not scientific. There is also the amino acid argument. Koji's protease enzymes break soy protein down into free amino acids during fermentation, meaning the protein in miso is significantly more bioavailable than the protein in unfermented soy products. Your body does not have to work to digest the protein in miso the way it works to digest a piece of chicken or a handful of unfermented soybeans. The fermentation has already done that work. The amino acids arrive at the intestinal wall in a form that is ready to be absorbed with minimal additional processing. Glutamic acid is particularly relevant here. Miso is extraordinarily rich in free glutamic Acid, the naturally occurring form of the compound that the food industry synthesizes artificially and sells as MSG. Glutamic acid is a primary neurotransmitter precursor directly involved in brain function, learning, and memory. It is the compound responsible for umami, the fifth taste that makes miso soup profoundly satisfying in a way that a multivitamin is not, and it arrives in miso in concentrations that genuinely support neurological function rather than simply stimulating taste receptors. The enzyme story is the part of miso's biology that is hardest to replicate in a supplement because enzymes are delicate biological molecules that degrade during the processing, packaging, and storage that supplements undergo. A fresh container of unpasteurized miso paste contains active, functional enzymes because it has never been heated above the temperature that would denature them. A capsule that went through manufacturing, quality control, packaging, shipping, and shelf storage has had ample opportunity to lose enzyme activity, and most supplement manufacturers do not rigorously test for retained enzyme function at the point of consumer use. Let us be specific. Let us put actual numbers on the table and look at what this comparison actually means in practical financial terms over time, because this is the section where the argument becomes impossible to dismiss. A quality probiotic supplement costs between $30 and $80 a month in the United States. Let us use $50 as a conservative middle estimate. $50 a month is $600 a year. Over 10 years of supplementation, that is $6,000 spent on a product that delivers between 1 and 15 bacterial strains in a form that suffers significant viability loss before it reaches its intended destination. A container of good quality miso paste costs between $2 and $4 and lasts the average person 2 to 3 weeks when used as a daily tablespoon in morning soup. Let us use $3 per container and 3 weeks per container, which works out to approximately $52 per year. $52 per year for 200 to 400 bacterial strains, plus a full package of active digestive enzymes, plus free amino acids, plus umami compounds with neurological relevance in a living food matrix that dramatically improves bacterial survival during transit to the gut. $600 per year versus $52 per year, 15 bacterial strains versus potentially 400, freeze-dried and processed versus alive and enzymatically active. That is not a close comparison. That is not a marginal advantage. That is the difference between a product that exists because most people do not know about the alternative and an alternative that has been quietly delivering superior results for longer than any modern supplement company has existed. Japan did not develop miso as a health intervention. Japan developed miso because it was a practical, affordable, durable way to preserve soybean nutrition through long winters. The health outcomes were a side effect. The 1,000-year clinical trial ran without anyone intending to run it, and the results are written in the microbiome data of every Japanese adult whose gut has been studied. The supplement industry is not evil. It is responding to a genuine need created by a food system that stripped the fermented food from Western diets over the course of the 20th century and left people without the microbial inputs their guts require. The industry grew because the need was real, but the solution was always available. It was sitting on a grocery store shelf, labeled in Japanese, misunderstood as a soup flavoring, and priced at $2. That is the gap this video exists to close, and the gap is not closing on its own. The probiotic supplement market is growing, not shrinking. More products, higher prices, more sophisticated marketing every year. Meanwhile, miso sits in the same aisle it always sat in, at the same $2 it has always cost, quietly delivering what the growing supplement wall is trying to approximate. Understanding what miso is biologically and why it works is one thing. Understanding how Japan actually consumes it is another, and the consumption pattern is as important as the product itself. Because eating miso occasionally or using it as a marinade once a week does not produce what daily miso soup before breakfast produces. The mechanism requires consistency, and the Japanese approach to consistency is embedded in a specific daily ritual that has specific biological logic behind it. The traditional Japanese morning begins with miso soup, not alongside breakfast, before breakfast. An empty stomach receives the miso soup first, before any other food has altered the stomach's chemistry, before digestive enzymes have been called into service for other purposes, before the bacterial payload from the miso has to compete with a large food mass for transit conditions through the gut. The soup itself is prepared simply. 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon of miso paste dissolved in hot water that has been allowed to cool slightly below boiling because boiling water kills the live bacteria that make miso valuable. This is a point that the vast majority of Western miso soup recipes and restaurant preparations get wrong. Miso should never be boiled. It should be stirred into water that is hot enough to dissolve and warm but not hot enough to pasteurize. 140 degrees Fahrenheit is the approximate threshold above which significant bacterial die-off begins. Most people's idea of hot water is hotter than this. The traditional additions are minimal: a piece of tofu, which adds protein and a neutral surface that the miso bacteria can colonize during the brief period between dissolving and consumption; a strip of dried wakame seaweed, which provides prebiotic fiber that feeds the bacteria being delivered and significantly improves their survival and establishment in the gut; a few slices of green onion, which contribute prebiotics and mild antimicrobial compounds that create a selective environment favoring the beneficial bacteria over pathogenic ones. This combination, misobacteria plus prebiotic fiber from seaweed plus the protective protein matrix of tofu, is a delivery system so well optimized for getting live bacteria to the large intestine that it looks deliberately engineered rather than culturally evolved. It was not deliberately engineered. It evolved through 1,000 years of people eating what tasted good and worked well, and it arrived at a formulation that modern probiotic delivery science would be impressed by. The frequency matters as much as the composition. Every morning. Not most mornings, not when convenient, every morning. The microbiome is a dynamic ecosystem that must be continuously fed to maintain its composition. Supplement users who take their capsule most days rather than every day are getting a fraction of the potential benefit because they are delivering bacteria inconsistently into an environment that requires consistent input to maintain the populations that have been established. Japan's every morning ritual eliminates this problem structurally. The habit is so ingrained that skipping it feels wrong, not like a missed supplement but like missing breakfast itself. Japanese children do not learn about gut health from a nutrition label. They learn it from watching their mother dissolve miso into the morning pot, from the smell of it before school, from the warmth of it being handed to them before anything else. The habit is installed before they are old enough to evaluate it and serves them for the rest of their life. The scientific study of the gut microbiome is, in historical terms, extremely recent. The Human Microbiome Project, which first systematically characterized the microbial communities in and on the human body, was only launched in 2007. The specific mechanisms by which gut bacteria influence immune function, mood, metabolism, and disease were largely theoretical before the genomic sequencing technology that made their study possible became affordable in the last 15 years. Japan has been running its 1,000-year miso experiment for approximately 985 years longer than modern microbiome science has existed. The research is now catching up to the practice, and the findings consistently validate what the practice already demonstrated at a population level. Studies on miso and gut microbiome composition have found that regular miso consumption significantly alters gut bacterial populations in the direction of greater diversity and higher beneficial species prevalence within weeks of consistent daily intake. Studies on the specific bacterial species in traditionally fermented miso have identified strains with documented benefits for gut lining integrity, immune regulation, and metabolic function that are either absent from or present in far smaller quantities in commercial probiotic supplements. Research on isoflavones, the plant compounds in soybeans that are transformed by fermentation into more bioavailable forms, has found that fermented soy products like miso deliver equal, a compound produced from soy isoflavones by specific gut bacteria, at dramatically higher rates than unfermented soy. Equal has documented anti-inflammatory properties and has been specifically studied in the context of cardiovascular health, bone density, and menopausal symptom reduction. Japan's traditional diet delivers equal through miso. The Western health industry sells equal as a premium supplement. The natto kinase research is also relevant here, though natto is a different fermented soy food. The fermented soy ecosystem of Japanese cuisine collectively delivers compounds that the supplement industry has begun selling individually at significant markups, and the research increasingly supports that the food matrix delivery is more effective than the isolated supplement delivery for the same reasons that have been discussed throughout this video. Context matters. Biological complexity matters. The whole food produces outcomes that the extracted component cannot replicate. The science is arriving, slowly, at the conclusion that Japanese food culture reached through pragmatic observation 1,000 years ago. Ferment the soybeans, eat the result every morning, maintain the gut ecosystem that keeps the body functioning. Do not overthink it. The irony embedded in all of this research is worth a moment. The most advanced gut health science available is converging on what a Japanese grandmother in 1200 AD would have found completely obvious. Eat your miso every day without fail. The scientists have arrived after decades of genomic sequencing and microbiome mapping at the same place Japan never left. This is what 1,000 years of Japanese gut health looks like reduced to its simplest form. A container of miso paste purchased for $2. A teaspoon dissolved in water that is hot but not boiling. A strip of dried wakame stirred in. A piece of silken tofu added. Consumed before anything else in the morning while the stomach is still empty. That is the entire protocol. That is what the supplement industry is charging $600 a year to imperfectly approximate. That is what Japan has been doing since roughly 700 AD, through every war, every modernization, and every disruption the country has experienced in 13 centuries. The miso soup never stopped. The gut microbiome never lost the diversity that daily fermented food input maintains. The practical starting point is straightforward. Tomorrow morning, before your coffee, before your phone, buy a container of unpasteurized miso paste and make 1 bowl of miso soup. Look for unpasteurized on the label or look for miso in the refrigerated section. Refrigeration means it is alive. Pasteurized miso has been heat-treated and the bacteria killed, making it a flavoring rather than a probiotic food. Dissolve 1 teaspoon in water that has sat for 1 minute off the boil. Add dried wakame, add a cube of silken tofu, drink it first thing before eating anything else. Do that every morning for 30 days without exception. Then compare how your digestion feels in week 4 to week 1. You are not starting a diet. You are restoring a daily practice that populations have demonstrated works at scale across generations, and that modern science is confirming was correct all along. Tell me in the comments whether you already drink miso soup in the morning or whether this is the first time you have seriously considered it. And if someone you know is spending $50 or $100 a month on supplements without results, share this with them. The solution has been in the grocery store the whole time. Japan never forgot where to look for it. I will see you in the next one.